Okay. Yeah. So, так. Дорогие друзья, мы в прямом эфире, мы начинаем нашу трансляцию, наш вебинар. Он будет проходить на английском языке, я буду переводить некоторые основные моменты, и у нас будет потом трансляция в записи. So, good evening. I would like to present to everyone Sophie Oakes, the owner of a big agency specializing in European, British, American education. Over the past several, years or decades, many parents have been thinking of different options of giving the best education to the children. And all these tracks look very very important, very good for the children's perspective. We really want to see how we can give our children everything, but we really know very few things about how is it to enter an educational system of a different country. So Sophie, thank you very much for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Anna, very much for having me. And if I could just tell you a little bit about myself, I think which is on the next slide. I have worked as an educational consultant for 15 years now, and I've lived in the Middle East, London, and I now live near Oxford in the UK. And my experience is really helping families choose the right school for their children and university, and help the applications there, both across UK, Europe, and the US. However, I do have a specialist consultant who helps primarily with US applications, as they are very different from UK and Europe university applications. I know a lot of you are very interested in the higher education university applications. And if Anna will help me back again, I'd love to do a whole webinar just on universities. I will cover it today, but my primary objective is to explore different curriculums throughout the Middle East, UK, and Europe, so that you have a better understanding of what is out there for your children.
Кратко переведу. Софья 15 лет занимается образовательным консультированием в образовании, работала в больших агентствах, и сейчас у нее свое агентство, и она помогает выбрать правильный образовательный трек родителям и детям. И сегодня мы будем говорить про самые разные возможные стратегии, чтобы получить общее представление о том, откуда и с чего начинать, как делать. Okay.
Anna, can we move to the next slide, please? Just so that you understand, the way that I work is getting to know families. I've helped families across the globe, and lots of Russian families find the right educational pathway for their children. My children were educated in Dubai until the age of 10, when we came back to the UK, and I have one studying at Eton College and the other one at St Edward's, Oxford. I go around schools both in the UK, Europe, and in the Middle East on a regular basis. That is how I know about these schools. I have very good relationships with the admissions teams, and that's why I feel I can give you an informed decision about which school to choose.
Так, Софья работает с большим количеством школ и всегда очно лично посещает школы и всегда лично сопровождает семью, подыскивая школу для ребенка и помогая с самыми сложными, неожиданными образовательными треками, которые здесь возникают. Okay.
Can we have the next slide?
Yep.
So this is what we're going to cover in the webinar today. The advantages of educating your child abroad in an independent school, most importantly, the different curriculums, and what do schools look like in the Middle East or the UK or Spain or Switzerland. Let's have a general look at that. And then how to choose the right school for your child and how to prepare them for university.
А сегодня будем говорить про преимущества образования, которые существуют в различных странах, какие есть вообще образовательные сценарии, вот эти curriculums, и в какие школы можно найти и в странах Востока, в Дубае, в Европе, в Великобритании, как правильно выбрать школу для ребенка и подготовить его к университету.
And the next
Okay.
slide. So these are the 3 different curriculum options that you may be able to choose from in the country that you choose to settle in. So there's International Baccalaureate, which is originated in Switzerland, has been going for 60 years now, I think. The UK curriculum and the US curriculum. So if we move on to the next slide, and I'll talk to you about the International Baccalaureate. So there are essentially 3 main parts. There's the primary years programme, which is ages 3 to 12, the middle years programme, age 11 to 16, and finally the diploma programme, age 16 to 19. There is a career-related programme that's really for children who are not heading to university, but straight into the job market. And it's quite unusual to do with career-related programmes. So let's stick with the other 3. The glorious thing about the International Baccalaureate is it has a thematic learning structure in the primary years programme. So, for example, you could take the subject of water and you could be studying lakes, oceans, and geography. You could be doing volumes of maths, and you could learning about the water nymph by Pushkin in your literature lessons. So they take these themes and they run them through all subjects. However, what it misses out on that the Russian curriculum has and the French curriculum and the British curriculum has are these very rich building blocks within maths and English. They don't concentrate on grammar. Grammar is a very small part of the overall picture. For example, in the British curriculum, when your children are little, they'll be learning about their number bonds, like numbers 9 and 1 that make 10, 8 and 2, 7 and 3, 6 and 4. But within the IB, it's a much more holistic approach and a more general approach. They may not be learning their times tables, for example. Then you have the middle years programme, which was the last part of the IB to be developed. And it continues the same ideas as in the primary years programme, but there are no examinations in the IB until you get to 18. So there is a cautionary part at the age of 16. There are no examinations. And you have continuous assessment, but they're not exams. Then you go to the IB diploma programme, and this is the final 2 years of school. And this is fantastic, but probably the best part of the IB. You learn 6 subjects, 3 at higher level, 3 at standard level. You have to have maths, a language, and a science. This is more similar to the rest of Europe and probably similar to the Russian curriculum. However, on top of those 6 subjects, you also have the theory of knowledge, which is a 1,600-word essay. You have the CAS, which is creativity, activity, and service, which is a project that can be charitable, volunteering, or a personal challenge. And then you have the extended essay, which is a 4,000 word essay. The total amount of points you can get is 45. Now, to get into Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale, you'll need over 40 points to get there, including all the rest of the tests you have to pass. But we're looking at really high levels. The general range of top universities is between 36 and 39 points beyond that. And each subject is marked out of 7. And then there's a point for TOC, CAS, and EE that totals 45.
Mm-hmm. So you have to have like 3 higher level, and for top universities and for between 35 and 40.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's an amazing program. It's an amazing program that you can study after. You could be in the British curriculum and then move on to do the IB curriculum. You don't have to have been at an IB school all the way through. Okay, so now we're going to move to the UK curriculum on my next slide. And the UK is divided into 3 as well. You've got your primary education from 5 to 11. All UK children start school at 5. Secondary education, which is ages 11 to 16, and the 6th form, which is the last 2 years of school. You either do A-level or the IB. And similar to the Russian curriculum, children get tested about 3 times nationally. So they get tested at 11 when they're in their senior school. They get tested at 16 when they do GCSEs, and then they get tested at 18 when they take their A-levels. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I will give you the breakdown of what GCSEs are and what A-levels are. GCSEs, you take when you're 16, you take between 8 and 12 GCSEs of a range of subjects, but you have to have the core subjects: maths, English, science, and humanity. There's lots and lots of choice beyond those core subjects, from anything from music technology to further maths and everything in between. It does depend on the school that you choose as to what options are available, but most schools offer a really good range. And GCSEs matter. They matter if you're applying to a top university. They want to see that you achieve good grades at age 16 before you specialised into doing A-levels. Now, A-levels are aged 16 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Sorry, my thing just went. So you can choose 3 subjects and possibly an EPQ as well. And an EPQ is the extended project qualification, which is like the extended essay in the IB. And this is very helpful, the EPQ, because if you are going to a UK university and they say, we would like you to have 3 A's in your A-levels, and you take your exams and you drop 1 A-level and you get AAB, then you could say, but I got a really good mark in my EPQ. Would you still consider me? And they might well consider you, depending on the university you're aiming for. So you can choose any 3 subjects that you want for A-level. They can be as varied as music, biology, and English, But if you know roughly what you want to do at university, then you must look into what A-levels are the most suitable. For example, if you want to study economics at university, you must have maths A-level. If you want to do medicine, you must have at least 2 sciences. If you want to do engineering, then it's wise to have maths. So it's very important to consider what you might want to do at university, which is a really hard decision to make for a 16-year-old. But you can keep your options open and have maths, a language, and a science, and you'll be absolutely fine when applying to university. So if we move on,
It's very so in A-level, 3 main subjects. Very high level.
Very high level. They're very specialized, these subjects. You understand them in a huge amount of detail. It's an unusual system, but it's still the passport to UK universities. So if you're sure that you want your child to go to a UK university, then A-levels just might be the right option for them. Now, if we move on, do you want to do any explaining, Anna?
But do British universities baccalaureate?
They love the baccalaureate. And if you want to keep your options open and you want to do US universities and UK universities, then you study the baccalaureate.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So if we move on to...
Shall we proceed to the next slide?
Yes, please. I'm going to complicate matters because the timeline in UK education is really complicated. If you are living in London and you have a baby, you have to register that baby for a nursery school or a private school at birth, sometimes from the hospital bed. Not for all schools, but for some you do. Then you have the primary schools aged 4. And again, you have to be on your toes and look out to register and put them in from at least 2 years before, if not at birth. And then you have preparatory school, where some children move at 7 or 8. In London, if you move at 7 or 8, you are applying to one of the most selective schools in the country, and the competition is rigorous and hard. But again, you have to register in advance. 11 plus. This is the 11 plus is the exam that all children take. But if they're moving to a different senior school, which is very normal in the UK, you don't stay at the same school from aged 4 to 18. That does not happen, very rare. So you will move school, probably aged 11, and you will make exams for that particular school, including your 11 plus. If you're looking for boarding schools, then you will be looking to go at 13. And if you are applying to somewhere like Eton or Harrow, then you need to be registering and looking to put them forward for that school at least 3 years in advance. And preparation is rigorous. 16 plus. Now, this is a really common moving point, particularly for international families. This is the moment where you can decide, right, I'm going to put my child into a school in the UK for the last 2 years, where they can choose between doing A-levels or the IB, and in the Middle East or Europe. This is a common entry point. Now, you need to register and apply a year in advance of arriving at the school in September. And depending on the school,
child is around 15 years.
Yeah. around 15 years old, you need to apply and you will take your exams for that school a year in advance. And then obviously at 18 plus, you're making your university applications. Does that make sense? It's very complicated, and that's why I'm here.
Yes. When we are considering the 16 like day or boarding school national scenario, we are speaking well, private schools, or we can't enter a grammar school.
So a grammar school you can enter, and again there will be competitive entry exams in January before September start.
Okay. All right, I see.
So if we move on to the next slide, which is an overview of the US curriculum, which is known as the K-12 curriculum, kindergarten to year 12. It's sort of similar to the IB primary years program. There's a broad range of subjects. There is a very large emphasis on play, particularly in the early years. It's very different from the Russian system. There is no rote learning. You don't ever learn a poem, or you would never learn anything off by heart. There's an emphasis on presentation. They're often asked to talk in front of the class. That is very, very familiar in the US system. And that's why it's you can see that when you watch American children talking, you can see that they've had a lot of practice of standing up and delivering a speech. There are a broad range of subjects. Again, like the British system, it's divided into three. You have your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school. The curriculum, if you're moving to the States, the curriculum can differ between each state. They can interpret it how they want to interpret. So when you go to a school, it might be the New York curriculum or a different state's curriculum, and it's worth having a look into those. And then at the end, at the final 2 years, they take their APs, which is up to about 5 subjects, and they are marked out of 5. And these are required to get you into US universities alongside the SATs or ACTs. If you're going to go for a really top class Ivy League university, you need to have SAT scores of over 1,500 points. And you have to have your high school diploma as well. And again, if you're going for a competitive university, then that GPA has to be really high. If we can move to the next slide, I'm just going to give a breakdown of the US curriculum on the next slide. And you are, it's generally about a year behind the UK curriculum. And that's partly because they start school a year later. They start at 6 rather than 5, which I think is similar to Russia. However, my key point here is that if you enter your child into the US curriculum, it is very hard to move them to another curriculum. If you want to move your child from the US curriculum to the UK curriculum, they are going to have some catch up. It's not the same the other way around. You can do the UK curriculum and move very easily into the US curriculum. So it's a very, very key point that if you're unsure about which curriculum to choose, then choose the British or even the IB before the American, because it's harder to move. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about schools. and what they might look like. And I thought we'd start with the Middle East. And if we look at the next slide, which is all about schools in the Middle East, and they are purpose-built and look fantastic because they have been built. There's lots and lots of space. They've got lots of facilities, and they are pretty fantastic on paper. If we move to the next slide, I'm going to give you a rundown of what it might look like if you were to move to the United Arab Emirates. There are approximately 567 independent schools in the United Arab Emirates. If we go back one slide, Anna, and they are very large scale. One more slide. Large scale, and quite often they're for-profit schools. So they can, this is what sometimes puts parents off. The for-profit can be at the expense of teachers' salaries. It can be, it is a business at the end of the day. However, there are lots of amazing schools that are not for profit, that are the oldest schools in the UAE, and they give just as good an education, but without such shiny facilities. I do remember going to one for-profit school that even had a planetarium in it. So, I mean, it's extraordinary what they have. The benefits are amazing. I mean, not only do you have the great facilities, but you have that international demographic of pupils, which just offers amazing opportunities for all our children. They will have friends from around the world. They do have to study Arabic. It is compulsory. It can be up to 4 hours a week, depending on the school. And the Arabic is not taught brilliantly well. And it's difficult to use Arabic outside the classroom because everybody speaks to you in English. So it's an odd one. I understand why they do it, but there's not the opportunity to really use it. The costs I have put on the slide. It's on the next slide, Anna. And there really is a cost price for everyone. They have every curriculum in the Middle East that you can think of. You can choose between the IB, the UK, the US, Indian, German, whatever curriculum you want, it is available. And different schools have different prices. Parents can be quite, they always think the next school, the latest school is the best school. Class sizes are a little bit bigger than you might find in the UK. And if you're choosing a UK curriculum school, then it's not the same as a UK school in the UK. The rules are not as rigorous. The academic standards are not as generally as high because they're non-selective and often taking pupils who have no English language, and they're accepting everybody. But that makes for a fantastic school that everybody brings something to the table, that everybody's festivals are celebrated. It's a really amazing environment to be in. But I think that some parents can have a different expectation of those schools than the reality of them. They are also generally huge schools. They can be up to or over 2,000 pupils per school. So they are really big. Now, if we move on to Europe, let's have a look at the next slide. And those schools in Europe, I'm really covering here Spain, Portugal, and of course, Switzerland, that offers some of the best international schooling in Europe at a price. However, international schools are on the growth because of people moving and living in different countries. They are similar in some ways to the UAE, i.e., if you have a school in Spain that gives the British curriculum, it's not going to be exactly the same as a school in the UK. However, they are closer to the UK in many respects than the ones in the UAE or the Middle East. And if we go on to the next slide, I'll just run through a little bit more of what you can expect to find in Europe. And here I'm really talking about international private schools, not their state education. With regards to the state education, there are so many other parts to your move that are difficult for me to work with, such as your work visa, etc., that I can give you an overview of their state education, but not which schools you can go to. So if we start with Switzerland, their state education is amazing and would be worth going to a state education school in Switzerland if you can get to Switzerland. Beyond that, the day and boarding schools are pretty amazing, and you can choose from such a variety of schools. You can do the curriculum in English and French or English and German, depending on where the school is, or just straight English. The majority of the boarding schools have very few day pupils, but there are some other day schools that have a boarding section that isn't as big as their day school pupil intake. The curriculum, they tend to offer the IB in the last 2 years, but they might well offer GCSEs at 16 as well. Although in Switzerland, I know that's changing and it is quite difficult. They tend to do the IB all the way through. Now, the extracurricular activities are amazing, and the boarding schools really have an emphasis on expedition. So every term, the whole school will go on an expedition, and this is throughout all the boarding schools. And you go camping and you walk in the hills, and it's a whole school experience. And of course, you can do your skiing and your sailing. The sports tend to be more individual sports, an emphasis on individual sports than, say, the British schools with the cricket and the rugby and the football and the netball and the hockey, which is more team sports. Of course, you can do team sports in Switzerland, but there is a big emphasis on individual sports as well. We've got the costs. Now, I've put down the costs on this slide just to make you horrified. They are the most expensive school in Switzerland is 160,000 euros a year, or over 160,000 euros a year. Madrid and Spain and Portugal offer private education at a very good price, particularly compared to the UK. There's some really good value schools out there that are incredible and offer a fantastic education, again with smaller class sizes, but with all the opportunities that are available within their nearby surroundings. So if we move on to the next slide, and I'll explain what schools in the UK look like. And of course, they're all generally in beautiful old buildings. They rely heavily on their reputation and their academic standards, their history and tradition. And they're really at pains to point out that they have very good pastoral care. Now, if we move to the next slide, I'm going to give you an overview of what a day school in London, for example, looks like, and what a boarding school in the countryside looks like. Now, day schools in London, there's a wide variety of them, but space is at a premium. So often they are very oversubscribed, and they can have not very much space. They're in townhouses, but what they make up for in lack of space, they have very, very good academic standards. You have to choose between single-sex schools and co-ed schools. And I know that this is often a unique point to Russian parents who are all educating their children in co-ed schools. But some of our top schools are single-sex schools. And there are studies to show that both single-sex and co-education can work effectively in both ways. But people have strong opinions, so you have to bear that in mind. The entry points that you cannot miss for London day schools, and as I said, they can be extremely competitive to get into. Boarding schools, there are so many. I think there's over 500 boarding schools in the UK, and they are all really, really different. There's a saying that we have, that it takes a village to raise a child. And that is what boarding schools do. They have so much to offer the children. They are so experienced in looking after your children. They have seen it all before. But the wonderful thing is that everything happens under one roof. So you don't need to drive them to football, hockey, swimming. It all happens there. Perhaps they want to have a go at pottery, or maybe they want to play chess, or maybe they want to have a debating club, or perhaps they need to practice their violin. It all happens on site. The days are long, but everything is fitted into the day. You can choose curriculums as well. There are maybe one or two schools in the whole of the UK that do the IB from age 5 to age 18. But in the UK, you can choose the IB DP, the last 2 years. You can choose that at a lot of schools in England. Perhaps location is really important to you. These are things to consider when choosing a school. Has it got good airport links? Perhaps that it needs to be near a guardian, or also to consider the type of school it is. Do you want the school itself to be in a town, or perhaps you prefer it in the countryside? There are lots of things to consider. And it is important to consider all of those location things. The benefits are amazing. They learn to build up their independence, but they're surrounded by friends. They've got the opportunity to do things that they might never be able to do. They can set up their own societies or clubs, but they'll always have the support of the school behind them. The pupil demographic at these schools is increasingly international. I think in some cases it's up to 50%. Children are always encouraged to try new things, and really looking after them in the boarding houses they usually get exceptional care. Obviously, there are always stories of children who don't succeed or settle in, but that's when we know we haven't chosen the right school for the child, and I have to say that has never happened to me. If we can move to the next slide, I'm going to just go through how to choose the right school for your child. So academic standards. Of course, I know that you're on this webinar because education is so important to you and what you want for your children. But you have to align your child's ability with the setting that they need to be in. There is no point putting them into a school that is underachieving or overachieving for them, because they'll just get lost. So does the school provide all the extracurricular activities that your child specializes in? If your child is a really good swimmer or a really good rower, and this is a sport that they want to take on, perhaps even into higher education, we need to find the school that is the right fit for them, where they can develop those sporting prowesses. School size and class matter. Generally, in independent schools, you get a smaller class size. But if your child is somebody who you feel might get lost, then make sure you don't choose a massive school where they're going to get lost. It's just not worth it. There are plenty of really nurturing schools out there that will support your child in a smaller environment. Co-ed or single sex, we've spoken about this. This is generally only a UK dilemma. And location, again, we've spoken about that as well. Now, in the UK, all schools have their own values and ethos. And I know that this can be a really big point for parents. And sometimes it's perceived that schools are too liberal, and they celebrate gender issues too much, and their support for the LGBTQT societies is too much. Then don't go for a school like that. There are plenty of other schools that don't have that as part of their values and ethos. There are lots of Catholic schools where they have a wide variety of pupils that do not adhere to Catholicism, but adhere to the Catholic values. But the best thing you can do is visit the schools. It's the small things that make all the difference. Perhaps you meet a pupil who's got really good manners, or the uniform you think's nice, or you see the dining room and the food is extra special, or the class sizes are fantastic, or the values match your values. So it's so important, because when you go around the schools, you will immediately see how different they are from each other. Beware of league tables. They can be very misleading and hard to inform parents correctly. For example, if you told me that you want your daughter to go to King's Wimbledon because it's got really good IB results, I'll have to tell you that she can't go there until she's 16, because it's a boys only school before that. So there are lots of little nuances within the British system that make it quite difficult. But beware of league tables, because they're not accurate. They're far more accurate for universities and the course you want to study, but not so much schools, even in Europe. It's beware of league tables. Now, if you move on, if we can move on to the next slide, is how to prepare your child for school entry. Aptitude tests, they're not expensive. I run them regularly, and they benchmark your child against the UK independent schools average. This is in maths, English, verbal and non-verbal reasoning. And this will give us a really good indicator of where they sit, even if English is not their first language. However, for the really competitive schools, they do need to be good readers and good at English. And there are plenty of reading lists that I can give you, or that are out there, depending on the age of the child. Summer camps, really good. both in Europe and the UK, there are fantastic opportunities out there, particularly for getting the English up to speed. Podcasts, audiobooks, television in English, if you aren't considering English language. Listen to Anna and her top tips, because she's always got so much informative information and is a go-to for all sorts of extra advice on helping your children. And just be aware of the deadlines that you might have, particularly within the UK. The earlier you think about your child's education, the better. But don't worry, there's always time and opportunities to move them wherever they are in the year. I have done it at last minute, and it's entirely possible. So please don't worry about that. It's just something to think about. Now, then, if we move on to the next slide, this is just covering a little bit of how to prepare your child for university. And I'm going to do this quite vaguely, but I'm going to tell you the important points. No time is too early for the US application system. I'm working with a child who's 14 at the moment. In fact, he's Russian, and he will make UK and US university applications. But my colleague who does the American university applications, he is working exceptionally hard with this pupil now. You have to have a good academic track record, not just in the last 2 years. It has to be from the age of 14. There are lots of things you can do, and you can prepare for the SATs tests, and there are lots of things you can do to get your marks up for when you actually have to take the SATs, which will be when they're about 17. In the UK and the US, the primary objective is to expand your knowledge beyond the classroom. That is what universities are looking at. Are you widely read? Have you got a really deep interest in that subject that you've gone and studied a summer camp to do with it? Or maybe you've gone to do a summer camp because you wanted to find out about a subject you didn't know about. For example, psychology. Maybe you've never studied it, so you go and do a summer camp to do that. But it's really, really important to listen about everything outside the classroom. Your online courses, summer camps, books, podcasts, everything that you can do to build up your knowledge and be a specialist in your area. For the US as well, charity work and volunteering is important, but that is part of the IB curriculum. If you're going to choose the IB, that is part of that curriculum. So that's all covered. And unless you have a big, strong sporting ability, and this is a very key point, the sporting ability, because it really can get you to the US. You have to be top of your sport and potentially have reached national level, but it's going to significantly help you when you're applying to a top US university. And if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to cover a few things that will help you stand out in your university application. Firstly, subject knowledge. In the UK, this is key. If you're applying to top universities, you really have to know your subject. And that's what I was talking about in the last slide. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, there are admissions tests in your subject. And these people are extremely well versed in those children that have taken the time to go beyond the classroom. Your critical thinking and analytical skills, you can take courses for this. SATs are good, and A-levels are actually built on the premise of critical thinking and analysis. Debating, public speaking, this isn't for everyone, but it does build up your extremely useful skill set and being able to talk to people and form a coherent argument. This is useful for both US and UK universities. At a younger age, lots of international schools particularly offer things like the Model United Nations, and you get to go to the United Nations and you can see how the chambers work, and you get to debate a topic that's critical to the world. Reading beyond the curriculum. This is the most important one. The more informed you are about your subject and its wider context, the greater understanding you will have of that subject. Leadership, that goes without saying. It's not essential for the UK university applications. It's not something that is part of the application system, but nevertheless, in your academic reference, your teacher is likely to say, yes, this child had a leadership position, and it's left to them to really sing their praises. Sports, music, drama, dance, all the extracurricular, so important for your US applications. They want to see the whole person. And if you are particularly good at something, they'll think, oh yes, because they have so much competition between the universities, they'll think, oh yes, we'd really like that person for our sailing team. We'd really like that person for our dance team. So you really need to consider that carefully. It's got to be a major part of the US applications. The Duke of Edinburgh Award is a British award, but it is offered throughout schools. All international schools offer the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and it's very widely recognised by the US as well, because it's designed to build the confidence of young people, give them those life skills that they need through a series of challenges, and it encourages people to grow. They do community service. There's physical and mental development as well. If you get the gold Duke of Edinburgh, I think you go to Buckingham Palace and meet the King or something. Volunteering, again, a really important part, particularly of a US application, but also in the UK. Obviously, it's incorporated into the IB, but it's a really lovely opportunity, and most schools will offer the opportunity for young people to go and, say, work in a primary school, or they'll read to younger children, but it also can be about fundraising. If there's a particular cause in their life that they want to raise funds for, then that can be part of the volunteering. So really, the most important point to take from that slide is outside the classroom, that anything that relates to the course that you want to study at university, that is the most important takeaway about getting into universities. And that is the end of my webinar. I hope it's helped. I know it's a hugely general topic, but I am here to answer any of your questions that you might have through Anna. I have a Russian speaker on here as well, and we're going to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, I can't hear you, Anna.
Sorry. Okay, thank you very much. That was really very, very, a very exhaustive picture probably of what the education abroad is. And we already have some questions. Right. So first of all, the first question is, there is a number of online schools today that have this, well, that give this opportunity to get some international education, A-level, IB, etc. Are the universities going to accept the certificates? Is there a chance to give, like, well, your IB or A-level education
Yes.
online from Russia and then enter?
Yes, there is the
Okay.
opportunity, and universities will recognise them. I think the main criteria that we need to consider is where the exam takes place, because I know that Pearson are not in Russia at the moment, and you can't take A-level exams in Russia. So we need to absolutely check that we can sit the A-level exams somewhere. It may be at the
Okay.
British Embassy.
All right. So we actually can get the education online, but then we have to take the exams somewhere abroad.
Yes. And there are some amazing online schools, some really, really good ones.
Okay. Fine. There was also a question about France. France has the international baccalaureate.
The
mainly.
French baccalaureate,
French.
and the
Okay.
international baccalaureate. The French baccalaureate is, it's a difficult one, because it covers very, very many topics, but it's very hard to specialize. So, for example, I had a French student last year who made an Oxbridge application. She made an application to Oxford to study physics, and she was having to study 9 other subjects at the same time. And as much as she tried to do her physics, she had to study the syllabus of the A-level physics, and she just didn't quite have the ability to get to Oxford because she was studying so many other subjects. But France does offer the international baccalaureate at some of its schools as well.
All right. Yeah. So this is a very challenging situation, very difficult one, when you have to actually follow all the subjects.
Yeah.
Can't focus on.
Whereas because she was competing against children who had only taken 3 subjects.
Yes.
And one of those would have been physics.
Well, there's a question about IB schools in Moscow. If they are certified IB schools, they will be accepted in Europe and in Britain.
100%, yes.
Okay, but we have to check on the site, because on the
it will say, it should say that it's IBO credited, but also go on to the IBO website and check that it's one of their schools.
All right. If we are thinking about a foreign university, Britain, Europe, whatever, what is the best age to start preparing, thinking about the language, the key subjects, etc.? What do you usually recommend to the parents? Like you said, if you're in Britain and, well, you have to register the child at birth. Well, if we are abroad, what's the best age to start preparing?
It's only for the nursery schools to register at birth. It's very silly. So for university, you make your application when you're 17 going on 18. That's when the application deadline is coming up now. It will be January the 29th for this September. So usually the best time to start thinking about university is 2 years before. Start thinking about the areas that you really enjoy studying. So in the UK, we have a saying that you go to university to study the subject you love. After that, you can do your master's, or you can be trained in anything. But the careers market will train you better. They don't mind if you have a degree in history of art and then you want to go and be an accountant. That's fine. But you need to start thinking about it from about the age of 16, if not before, so that you can book your summer camps. You can explore different options about what you might want to study, which could be something that you have never studied before. Maybe psychology, maybe sociology, maybe history of art. So you need to do some research, and that means going to summer camps or doing an online course or reading about it. So the earlier you think about it, the better. For European universities, the same, and for US universities, as soon as possible.
Okay, and there's also the question, the matter of language, because while in most cases you need either very high level of English or a European language in which you're going to get your higher education also.
Yes. So the UK has the IELTS system, and generally they're looking for at least 5 or 5.5 in listening, reading, writing. And that, we have specialist tutors that will help you prepare for IELTS. And it's something that you can take the IELTS test after you have made the application to university. You don't have to prove it before you make the application. But the university will say, yes, you may come to our university if you get 36 points in the IB and you have an IELTS score that is higher than 5.5. So then you take the IELTS test and then you send it in.
If we have a Russian school, state school certificate or diploma, what countries can we apply to get the university education? Probably not Britain. I think that Russian certificates are not recognized, but in Europe, as far as I know, it is possible.
So there are amazing European universities. You just need to decide the language of instruction. So there are lots of universities now that offer almost all their courses in English. But let's say German is your language of choice, and there are lots that you can probably go to Germany. And to be honest, I'm not totally sure about European acceptance of Russian certificates, but I'm pretty sure Spain is okay.
I think it all depends on the university, because I know that the Netherlands, they do accept. Definitely, of course, this is you have to pay for the education as a foreign citizen.
Yeah.
So which comes quite pricey, but definitely cheaper than Britain. So but it all depends on the university and sometimes on the program. So it should be just,
I agree,
known in advance.
It is tricky. It is tricky. But hopefully the doors will open up in the UK again soon.
Yeah. Do you actually feel that there is some prejudice against the Russian students, Russian school children entering universities? Like, very honestly.
That's brilliant question. It's a really important question. And the answer is no, not at all. There are wide communities of Russian and Ukrainian students. It is not an issue that I have come across. Now, I'm sure that you all have incidents that you can think of, but no, there is no prejudice. They just don't care. They're not likely to. I mean, they may want to ask you more questions, but they're not going to. It's not a prejudice.
Okay. All right. Especially when it comes to universities, I haven't seen anything like that.
Nor have I.
Universities, yes, it's still.
And Yeah, within the British boarding school communities, they were managed very carefully, the Russian-Ukrainian communities, and they've not had an issue at all. And also they don't not accept Russian students, which I think was something that was perceived in Russia, that they wouldn't be allowed to go to a British school, but they very, very welcome.
Yes. Okay. There's a question about the UK university admission process. What is the best way to be?
Sorry, Anna, you broke up a little bit there, but I think you're asking about the UK university application system. You make an application. You make one application for 5 universities, and you can choose between Oxford or Cambridge. You can't choose both, and you and then you or no Oxford or Cambridge. You choose 5 universities, but you have to choose the same course pretty much. And then you have an opportunity to have a personal statement, which is changing this year. And until this year, it was about 500 words on yourself, but all about your academic abilities. And now it's going to be a little bit different, and they're going to ask you 3 separate questions. And again, all about yourself and all about academics. They are not so interested in your extracurricular activities unless they relate to what you want to study at university. And you make an application, like I say, either a year or 2 years before you actually go to university, depending on whether you take a year off between school and university.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Once again, how important is the how important is the motivation letter for the universities?
So in the for the States, it's very, very important. And in the UK, you never see it. You never, ever see it. It's an academic reference letter. And again, the teachers have 3 parts that they have to fill in. And you as the pupil never see it. So it is very important, but the personal statement is more important.
Personal statement. So it is read and it should be very carefully written.
Yes.
Okay. When you help students in this difficult process, do you help them also to write this letter?
100%. So we write it together, they write it, but I help them bring out all the points that they find necessary. And it's a really good opportunity to have that period of self-reflection and really question yourself about what it is about the subject that you really want to study. It's my most favorite part. I love doing that bit. And it's a lovely opportunity.
Okay, let me see if we have some other questions. There are tons of questions about the amazing online schools, but I believe they must be different depending on the type of the education we're getting.
Yes, so that's an interesting point. So do you think that would be to get A levels in conjunction with the Russian system, or is that just to do A-levels? I mean, that is homeschooling.
Yes. Uh-huh.
That means they're not going to school and they're just going to do the online school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. So some more questions. If the student if the student has has his school education in English and his diploma is in English, does he also need to have his IELTS exam?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like if he's the if he finished the international school,
He still needs to have it.
still needs to have
If he's
it.
Russian, yes, he still needs to have it.
Okay. Now, just a second. Well, there's a question about Portugal. How good the system is there?
So the independent education system is ever growing, and it's amazing. But there are really old established schools in Portugal that have been educating their pupils for many, many decades in English, extraordinarily. So one of the best schools in Lisbon is St. Julian's, for example, which has been around for ages and is a very good school. But there are lots of others as well.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in the Lisbon area. I've heard more opening up in the Algarve, but the Lisbon area is very strong. You get a really good range of schools to have a look at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a question about the gap year. What do you think about it? How useful is it? And does it increase our chances to enter a university or just the other way around, vice versa?
That's a really good question. So the gap year is a really personal decision to make. I'm very much in favour of a gap year. I think that the child does a lot of growing up in that year and comes to university with a more grown-up attitude. I also think that they are going to have to work until they're 70 or 80, given our current age range growing and growing. And therefore a year off now is no bad thing. They'll never get it again. So I'm very for a gap year. I've had some pupils who have gone straight from school to Oxbridge, and they've really, really struggled with sort of almost like a burnout, where they've got such high marks at school. Then they've gone on to university and it's incredibly intensive, that just to have that year off is a really good opportunity. It's also a good opportunity to get work experience, to do charity work, to see the world, to do a course or learn a language. So universities in the UK and in Europe there is no advantage or disadvantage to having a gap year. However, let's say you make an application now for entry to university in 2026, taking a year off. Let's say you get your A-level results in June and they are not quite as good as you wanted them to be, and the university says, no, you've got a bargaining tool there. You can say, look, if I come to university this year, would it make a difference? And there's all sorts of things you can do, and not least retake your A-levels if you haven't done them correctly the first time round. So it's good to have the plan in your head, the just in case plan in your head. The gap year buys you time.
That's such a good expression, buys you time. We have some comments and actually thanks from our viewers for the language you are using tonight. So so comprehensible without that Adele style of speaking. When you're like, I managed to understand one word, and so we have many comments on how good it is to understand everything. So
thank you. Well, thank you for understanding English, because I'm ashamed to say that I don't speak Russian.
Well, but you really speak in such a way that really we can understand. Right. There are also a couple of questions about the IELTS and GCSE. If the person has his GCSE certificate of English as a second language, does he still need IELTS?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sporting activities. We know that they are very important for the United States, but this is a very, as far as I know, difficult track, because you have to combine full-time sports and full-time learning, and that is a very hard thing for many students. For Europe and for Britain, are there any preferences for people who are very actively engaged in sporting activities?
So some UK universities do rate sports over, they do have a more competitive team spirit about them, but generally not. However, in Europe, the application system is very different to the UK and is slightly more similar to the US, in that it's more about the whole person and what they are bringing to the university. So yes, sports and any extracurricular is very valuable, very valuable. The US, even if you're not the best, they still need to know that you could potentially participate in certain sports. So it is important for the US. And if it's not sport, it should be music or drama or something extracurricular or art or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. I have an acquaintance. He's been working for many years with the tennis players who are entering American universities. And he actually said that this is a very important personal characteristic of a person, personal characteristic of a person. Like, the university knows that this student is able to work really hard. And it's the same thing about music or art, that we know that he's, well, hardworking in a certain way. So
he's got the discipline, yes.
Mm-hmm.
To work academically and do something extra. There are schools in Europe, international schools in Europe, that specialize in sports. And I know in Russia as well, you have a really strong heritage of producing amazing sports people. And that is possible in Europe, to go to an elite sports academy where they do the academics and they do the sports, particularly tennis, golf, tennis, golf, I think riding is the other one.
Mm-hmm. Riding, yes. We have a couple of questions about Australia. Do you by any chance work with Australian education?
I don't. I wish I did. I love Australia. I wish I did. So the Australian curriculum is very similar to the IB. And in fact, a lot of IB teachers come from Australia because they're very familiar with the way the IB works. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't, because there are amazing universities over there as well.
Yeah, there was a question about just to say about the possibility of getting a bachelor in the United Kingdom. I think that's totally possible.
Getting an undergraduate degree.
In Europe and then masters in Britain.
Yes, 100%. That is a very good route. Yes, yes.
Okay. If a student, something like very advanced, like the top math school in Moscow, and with, well, some good command of English, once what would you recommend in such a situation? 16 plus, or maybe starting earlier, or maybe a boarding school? What is like?
So I missed a little bit because the connection broke. But are you talking about a chap who's very good at maths, and when's the best time to enter the UK? I would say 16 plus, definitely. And I mean, day or boarding is absolutely fine. And he would take his A-levels, and he would also be doing further maths. He'll do maths and further maths, possibly economics, and one more.
Here I'm back again.
Yay, back again. Did you hear my answer? No.
Top math school, good English, around 12 years old. What is the best track for him to enter a Swiss university or a British university? What would you recommend? What's perfect time to start doing something, moving or entering a boarding school, or just completing the education in Russia, like looking for IB program? Or okay.
So my advice would be to go at 16 plus, because then he's entering into the A-levels and IB curriculum, the IBDP curriculum. He could take maths, and he would take further maths, and then he would take 2 more A-levels. And in this case, if he was really keen on maths or economics or computer science or anything in that world, he will be aiming for universities like Imperial College, like LSE in London, and A-levels would suit him amazingly well in order to make a good application to a top university like that.
Okay.
Or Gallen or Switzerland as well. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking about Britain, does a child need some kind of a portfolio that we need in the United States?
For university?
Yes.
No, unless you are doing an art degree or architecture or a design degree. You don't need a portfolio of any description. You will be required to give all your educational history and any transcripts from that history. So no, it's not. It's very different from the US in many respects, much more simple. But there still needs to be some accurate understanding of what they want to study.
Okay. There's also a question about Cyprus. Anything you would recommend there in terms of universities?
No, I don't know the university there at all. No, I'm sorry. I don't know it well enough. I've had lots of clients from Cyprus, but not going somewhere. To Cyprus.
Yeah. Yes. I have some students from Cyprus here in Moscow, and they're very happy to study in Moscow, actually. My last question would be about the way you work. Like, what is the procedure? In which ways do you help the parents? Can there be some maybe consultation, like a private session, answering some basic questions? or can you just help from the beginning to actually entering the university or a school? What is the way you work with the client, with families?
It all starts with an initial consultation that is paid for and takes an hour. And within that time, I get to know you and your family. And beyond that, I would like to meet the pupil, depending on how old they are. But very important for me to meet them. Online is fine. And then we work to put together an action plan. And obviously, every family is different. They've got different age siblings, different sex siblings. There are different timelines. So each plan I put together is bespoke. And it depends if they want schools or universities. And then we put together a range of services that you can pick and choose your services from. And you'll say, yes, I want that. I would like an aptitude test, please. Then I'd like you to help me get them into the right school or help me choose a school in London. Or you might say to me, look, I know the school I want to go to, but please, could you help me prepare my child for that school? If it's about university, then I have a sort of comprehensive university service that will help you from the age of 16, 17 or 18, whenever you're ready to make that application to university. I have my colleague who does the US, and that is a separate package, obviously, because it's a completely different process. So the main place first is to start with a consultation where you can ask any amount of questions that you want, and I will help you solve them, and then we'll see if you need more help beyond that.
Yes, I have one actually story, because we have some common acquaintances, a family you've been working with, and the mother there said that we actually were not very optimistic about one of our children, and we thought we didn't have much chance entering a British school. But then Sophie had a conversation with him, and she actually said, let's do one thing. I see some perspective. I have a plan. So it was really important to actually
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. He was a gorgeous boy. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, it's all gone a bit, I can't hear you anymore. Have we frozen? It's frozen.
Yeah, it's a no.
Oh, Hi, back again.
Back again. So this is probably the most horrible evening with the internet connection.
I'm so sorry.
I'm still happy that we managed to have this conversation. All right. So just to sum it all up, we will have the translation of the video. I think everything is going to be fine in that recording, and that we can send all the people who had registered to the webinar your package with the services that you provide, and also the whole webinar itself, and we somehow get the perspective today of possible paths to get into a European or a British or a Dubai university.
Yes. Well, it's Dubai's, yeah, they've got all the big names now. So I will send you the university service sheet as well.
Okay, that will just be amazing.
And so the last slide that had all the details on it, I think everybody must have got that. It's got Anna's telephone number on it as well, if they'd rather speak to somebody in Russian.
Okay, so you have a Russian consultant, and you also have a company or a member of staff who is actually helping people with visas.
I do. Would you like his details?
Well, I think that when it comes to like entering the
yes, just let them know that I can help with that.
Right. Okay, so we will probably now say goodbye to our audience, to our viewers. So thank you very much for this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been an utter pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
and
so
thank
much.
you, Anna, for organizing this.
I will end the stream.